AITA for leaving my sister's kid with a family friend after she was hours late picking him up. I 36 male agreed to babysit my sister's son 8 male last Friday night so she could attend a friend's event. My sister is a single mom, and I know she doesn't get a lot of time to herself, so I was more than happy to help out. I don't get to spend time with my nephew as often as I'd like. He's a great kid, funny and curious, and I was looking forward to a chance to hang out with him one-on-one. My sister assured me she'd be back early Saturday morning, so I figured we'd have a relaxed evening, and then she'd pick him up around breakfast time. On Friday, I was all set to make the evening as memorable as possible for my nephew. I wanted it to be a fun night he'd remember, something a little special since I don't get to see him often. I stocked up on all his favorite snacks beforehand: chips, candy, chocolate bars, even those little juice boxes he loves. I ordered a pizza with extra cheese and pepperoni, just how he likes it, and made sure to have some dipping sauces because he's all about those. I even bought a couple of fun board games and a puzzle, just in case he wanted something a bit different. Once he arrived, we dove right into the activities. He was absolutely thrilled, bouncing around and trying to decide what to do first. We started with a board game, one of those simple ones he could really get into without getting frustrated. Then, we moved to the movies. I let him pick, and he carefully selected his favorite animated films, almost like he was curating a playlist for the perfect night. We sat on the couch with blankets, made popcorn together. He loved pushing the button on the popcorn machine and watching it pop, and settled in. The whole vibe was cozy and laid back, and I could tell he was having an amazing time. Every now and then, he'd look over at me, grinning, as if to check that I was enjoying myself just as much as he was. And honestly, I was. It felt good to just be his fun uncle, laughing together, sharing jokes, and forgetting about everything else. The next morning, I woke up a bit early to make breakfast, hoping to surprise him with pancakes. But, as it turned out, he was up before I even made it to the kitchen, already full of energy and excitement. The moment he saw me, he asked if he could help make breakfast, so I figured, why not? We got out the pancake mix, and I let him stir the batter, though I had to keep reminding him not to go too fast to avoid splashes. Once we had the griddle heated up, I showed him how to pour the batter carefully. He was so proud of each little pancake, watching intently as bubbles formed on the surface. We decided to get creative, and I brought out some blueberries, strawberries, and even some whipped cream to make faces on the pancakes. He was laughing and creating pancake people with berry eyes and whipped cream smiles. It was simple, silly fun, and we both got a kick out of it. By 9 a.m. we were both full and feeling pretty accomplished with our breakfast creations. My sister still hadn't arrived, but I wasn't worried yet. I figured she might have just slept in, or maybe she was taking her time, assuming we'd still be in the middle of breakfast. No big deal. I shot her a quick text around 9:30, mostly to check in and make sure everything was fine. She replied almost right away, with a simple "I'm on my way," so I didn't think much of it. My nephew and I cleaned up our breakfast mess, and I suggested a few more games to pass the time. He was all for it, so we spent the next hour or so playing board games. At one point, he wanted to watch some YouTube videos, so we sat together and watched a few funny clips he liked. He has this infectious laugh that had me cracking up, too. It was such a genuinely good time, just the two of us. By 11 a.m. though, I was starting to feel a bit antsy. I had some plans with friends that afternoon and needed time to get ready, but with no sign of my sister yet, I was beginning to wonder if she'd been held up. I sent her another text, just to check her ETA, and casually mention that I'd need to leave by 3 for my plans. I figured a reminder wouldn't hurt, especially if she'd gotten caught up somewhere. I was trying not to feel impatient, though, because my nephew and I were still having a great time, and I didn't want to bring any of that energy into our day. But a small part of me was starting to wonder if she might cut things close. She replied with a "be there soon," but still no exact time. That vague response left me feeling a bit uneasy. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping to see some kind of follow-up message with an actual ETA, but nothing came. Every few minutes, I'd check the screen, only to see the same message, "be there soon," staring back at me like a cryptic message I couldn't quite decipher. My nephew, on the other hand, was completely unfazed. He was busy enjoying himself, running around my apartment, asking questions, showing me his latest little discoveries, and generally keeping up that boundless energy only an 8-year-old can manage. I didn't want to let on that I was starting to feel anxious, so I did my best to just roll with it and stay engaged in whatever he was doing. By 1 p.m. though, my patience was wearing thin. I still hadn't heard anything else from her, and I was growing increasingly frustrated by the lack of updates. Every now and then, my nephew would look up and ask, "Is Mom coming soon?" I'd smile and reassure him, saying, "She'd be here any minute now, buddy," even though I was starting to feel a knot form in my stomach. Each time he asked, I could feel the pressure building a little more. I wanted to keep him relaxed and happy, but in my head, I was already running through backup plans, wondering how much longer I should wait before I did something more proactive. Finally, I decided to call her directly, hoping she'd pick up and give me some kind of definite answer. I held my breath as the phone rang, each ring feeling longer than the last. But no luck, her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried to keep my tone light and polite, leaving a message that was firm but friendly, reminding her that I had plans later in the afternoon and really needed her to give me a better idea of when she'd be arriving. I made sure to mention that I was more than willing to work with her timing as best as I could, but that I just needed her to communicate. I hung up, hoping she'd check her voicemail soon and get back to me with a real update. By 2:30, my anxiety had turned into full-blown stress. I was officially in a bind. I'd originally planned to leave by then to get to my friend's party on time. My friends had organized this gathering weeks in advance. It wasn't just a casual get-together I could skip on a whim. I'd promised to be there, and I didn't want to let them down. I was now fully dressed and ready to go, pacing around the apartment with my phone in hand, feeling like a caged animal. My nephew kept glancing at me, and I could tell he was starting to sense my tension. I didn't want to worry him, so I tried to keep my tone upbeat whenever he asked about his mom, but inside, I was starting to feel a little panicked. I knew I couldn't just abandon my plans, but I also couldn't leave an 8-year-old at my place by himself. I weighed my options, going over them in my mind like a checklist, trying to find a solution that would keep everyone safe and happy. That's when I remembered Sarah, a family friend who lived in my building. Sarah had known my family for years. She was like an honorary aunt to me growing up, and she'd always been someone my sister trusted implicitly. My nephew knew Sarah well, and I knew he'd feel comfortable with her, so I figured she'd be the perfect person to help me out in this situation. I called Sarah, hoping she'd be available on such short notice. She picked up after just a few rings, and the relief in her voice when she heard it was me was palpable. I explained the situation, filling her in on my sister's absence and my nephew's need for supervision while I handled my own commitments. Sarah didn't hesitate for a second. "Of course, I'll help," she said, sounding genuinely happy to pitch in. She reassured me that she'd be able to watch him for as long as needed, and she even joked that she'd been meaning to catch up with him anyway. It was a relief beyond words. I explained everything to my nephew, crouching down to his level and making sure he felt comfortable with the plan. "Hey, buddy," I said, "I'm going to head out for a little while, but guess what? You get to hang out with Sarah for a bit." His eyes lit up, and he seemed genuinely excited about the idea. He'd always liked Sarah. She had a way of making him feel like the center of attention, and I knew they'd have a blast together. I could see his face brighten up, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. At least he was happy, which made this entire situation a little easier to handle. After making sure he had all his things and giving him one last hug, I walked him down to Sarah's apartment. Sarah welcomed him with open arms, smiling and chatting with him, as he eagerly shared everything we'd done over the past day. I went over the basics with Sarah, giving her my sister's contact information and letting her know I'd be reachable by phone if anything came up. She gave me a reassuring nod, and I could tell from the way she interacted with my nephew that he was in good hands. As I left her apartment, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, knowing he was safe and with someone who genuinely cared about him. After I dropped off my nephew with Sarah, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering concern. I knew I'd done what I could, but I also couldn't shake the nagging feeling that my sister might not be thrilled with how things played out. I left her a message before I left, explaining that I had to go, that I'd dropped off her son with Sarah, and that he was safe and in good hands until she got there. I included all of Sarah's contact details, just in case she needed to reach her directly. Sarah had promised to keep me updated, so I took a deep breath, thanked her again, and finally made my way out. It was already after 3:30 p.m. when I was finally able to hit the road, and I knew I'd be at least an hour late to the party. I hated the idea of missing so much time with my friends, especially since we'd all been looking forward to this for weeks. The closer I got to the party, though, the more I started to relax. I had done everything responsibly, taken every precaution, and, most importantly, made sure my nephew was with someone trustworthy. I tried to shake off the lingering anxiety that my sister would be upset. I couldn't change things now, and it wasn't unreasonable to expect her to communicate her plans better. I arrived at the party around 4 p.m. way later than I'd originally planned. As I walked in, I could feel the weight of the past few hours still clinging to me, like an invisible shadow. My friends greeted me enthusiastically, glad I'd made it despite the delay, and I did my best to settle in and focus on enjoying myself. I tried to push thoughts of my sister's reaction to the back of my mind, telling myself that surely she'd understand once I explained everything. Even as I mingled and caught up with friends, though, my phone stayed within reach, never out of my sight. Every few minutes, I found myself checking it, just waiting for a text or a call from my sister. Part of me hoped she'd text to thank me for arranging everything, acknowledging that it had been a tricky situation, but as the hours passed, I still hadn't heard a thing from her. I was starting to get a bit restless, trying to enjoy the party while mentally preparing myself for what might come next. I kept replaying everything in my head, convincing myself that I'd handled things responsibly. Finally, around 5 p.m. my phone buzzed, and I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. It was Sarah, letting me know my sister had picked up my nephew and she wasn't happy. Sarah didn't go into details, but that was enough for me to brace myself for whatever was coming. My heart sank a little as I imagined my sister's reaction. I was glad my nephew was safe, glad he'd enjoyed his time with Sarah, but now the real fallout was beginning to set in. I told myself it couldn't be too bad. I'd left him with a trusted family friend. This wasn't a case of me neglecting him or passing him off to someone unfamiliar. Surely, she'd realize that. As soon as I got home, I saw a long message from her waiting on my phone. I opened it, and as I read, each line felt like a punch to the gut. She accused me of abandoning my nephew, saying that I'd had one job and had failed her by leaving him with someone else. She went on about how I should have canceled my plans, waited however long it took, and that family comes first no matter what. She wrote as if I'd just walked out the door without a second thought, without even trying to reach her. I could feel my frustration bubbling up. Her message made it sound like I'd been careless, like I hadn't tried multiple times to get in touch with her before resorting to leaving my nephew with someone we both trusted. I was blindsided by how angry she was. I started drafting a response, trying to keep my tone calm and logical, despite the frustration building up inside me. I reminded her that she'd promised to be back in the morning, that I'd reached out multiple times, and that she'd ignored my calls and texts. I explained that I had left him with Sarah, someone we both knew and trusted, because I couldn't just wait around indefinitely without any word from her. I pointed out that I had my own plans and commitments and that I'd made sure he was safe and comfortable with someone he knew well. To me, it felt like I'd done the responsible thing under the circumstances, but she wasn't having any of it. Her response came quickly, and it was clear she hadn't softened. She kept doubling down, saying that I'd put my plans over my responsibilities to family, that if I really cared, I would have waited as long as it took. She couldn't seem to see past her own anger, as if my leaving him with Sarah was an unforgivable betrayal. I tried to explain my perspective, but it felt like every message I sent only made her angrier. Her words started to sting, making me second-guess myself, even though deep down I still believed I'd done the right thing. As I sat there, replaying our conversation in my head, I couldn't help but feel a mix of guilt and resentment. I was guilty because, yes, I had chosen to keep my plans instead of sacrificing my day to wait indefinitely for her to show up. But I was also frustrated because she'd put me in that position in the first place. I'd spent the entire morning with my nephew, had a great time with him, and was more than willing to help her out as she'd asked. But I hadn't expected her to disregard my time and my own commitments without so much as a heads up. Now, I'm stuck feeling guilty and second-guessing myself, Did I mess up by leaving him with Sarah? Should I have just canceled my plans and waited? I'm genuinely conflicted. My sister clearly thinks I'm in the wrong, and I can understand where she's coming from, but I also feel like her lack of communication left me with no other choice. So, Reddit, AITA for not waiting around and leaving my nephew with a trusted family friend when my sister didn't show up on time. Update. A few days after the fallout with my sister, things had just started to feel normal again. I'd gone back to my routine, still carrying a little bit of that lingering guilt but trying to move on. I figured we both needed time to cool off. I'd been hoping she might reach out with a fresh perspective, or at the very least, with a bit more understanding of my side of things. But I didn't hear from her, so I assumed she still needed more time to simmer down. In the back of my mind, I wondered if this would change our dynamic moving forward, if she'd hold this against me in the long term. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from her one evening. I didn't know what to expect, maybe an apology, or at least some kind of closure. But what I heard on the other end of the line shocked me. She was calm but direct and immediately launched into a plan she'd already made without asking me first. She casually told me that she would be dropping off her son at my place for a few hours, that her boyfriend and she had plans, and that I would need to watch him. There wasn't even a hint of a question in her tone, just a blunt announcement, as if it was already set in stone. She went on to say that this would give me a chance to make up for the previous incident, and that watching her son would be a way for me to redeem myself after having let her down. I was stunned. The audacity floored me. She'd ignored my feelings about what had happened last time, clearly still holding on to her grudge, and now she was using it as leverage. She was treating it as if I owed her something, as if I was indebted to her, all because I hadn't waited around for hours on end with no communication. She seemed to feel that her last-minute, unplanned demand was somehow justified as payback. As she laid out her plan, I tried to keep my composure, though my mind was racing. I couldn't believe her lack of consideration. It was like she had completely disregarded the fact that I have my own life, my own responsibilities, and my own plans. She acted like her decision to drop off her son was a done deal, as if I were merely an extension of her schedule, expected to be available at her beck and call. There was no recognition of the fact that she should have asked me first, or at least checked if I was available. And then there was the thinly veiled guilt trip, as though I needed to be the one to make amends after everything that had happened. After taking a breath, I calmly told her that I already had plans that night. I tried to make it clear that it was important to me, and that, if she'd wanted me to babysit, she should have given me more notice. I explained that it wasn't reasonable to call at the last minute and expect me to drop everything. But my response didn't seem to matter to her at all. She barely even acknowledged it, brushing it off, as if my plans and my needs didn't hold any weight. It was as if she had completely disregarded anything I'd just said, doubling down and insisting that I would, in fact, be available. I could feel my frustration building, but I kept my voice level, reiterating that I couldn't just cancel my plans on a whim. Her response was cold, almost dismissive. She didn't care. She seemed convinced that I was obligated to help her whenever she demanded it, even if it meant upending my own life. She was so wrapped up in her own needs and frustrations that she couldn't see past her own perspective. She didn't want to hear anything from me except agreement. When I told her that I was, in fact, refusing to watch him, she reacted like I'd committed some unthinkable betrayal. She seemed genuinely shocked that I wasn't bending to her will, as if my refusal was completely unexpected. There was a pause on her end, and I could sense the anger bubbling up. She finally said something short and curt, and then I heard a click. The call had ended. In that moment, I sat there feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger. I couldn't wrap my head around how entitled she'd become, or why she felt that her priorities should always supersede mine. My mind kept racing over the fact that she acted as if I were somehow responsible for her child whenever she needed me, and that she viewed my time as something she could use at her convenience. It was almost as if, in her mind, I didn't have my own life, my own needs, or even a right to my own plans. I was stunned by her lack of empathy and by how she had twisted the situation, portraying me as the one at fault for standing my ground. In that moment, I resolved to make it clear that I wasn't going to be a backup plan any longer. I wasn't going to be the person she could count on to drop everything whenever it suited her. I wanted to be there for my nephew, but I couldn't keep allowing her to bulldoze over my boundaries. As much as it hurt to think that this might create even more tension between us, I knew I couldn't keep allowing myself to be treated like this. This was her child, her responsibility, and she needed to start respecting the fact that my life was not just an extension of hers. The call left me frustrated, but it also left me resolute. I was done being taken for granted. If she couldn't see that, then perhaps it was time for her to realize that I wasn't just there to fulfill her needs whenever she demanded it. I had my own life. She should have understood that.